Passing through the veil of mystery, seeking answers no one is brave to ask. This is Bound to Truth.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
Only think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order when we are successful, and we will be.
Hello, everybody. This is Chris Lopez with Bound to Truth. It is Wednesday. What day? Let's see. It's 18th, 19th. So I believe it is the 19th, March 19th of 2025, this wonderful year. Hope everyone's having a great day. I'm actually recording on my vacation this week. I've been doing a lot of work trying to change things up a little bit with the podcast, especially when there's times where I don't have my co-host John. Of course, you all have heard John talk in this podcast. And so I'm going to definitely do something a little bit more of a narrative approach. Hopefully this will create a little bit more of a flow and continuity. And would love to get you guys' thoughts about it. And hopefully you will like it. And if not, and if you like me just kind of like what I'm doing right now, rambling about my conversation here, please definitely freely share with me. And speaking of which, how can you reach out to the podcast? boundshoe34@gmail.com. Share your thoughts, concerns, ideas. If you want to be a guest on the show or just share your stories, definitely reach out to us through that email. Again, boundshoe34@gmail.com. Other platforms you can listen to us is obviously on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Buzzsprouts, X, Facebook, and Amazon, and other platforms that may be available at your disposal. So today we're going to talk about a very interesting subject called the New World Order and Project Bluebeam, New World Order, Project Bluebeam, and what the end game looks like. So what we're going to be talking about with that is a lot of different conspiracies with it and what the end game looks like with it. I'm going to share quite a bit of videos that I'll be talking about today with my narration. So let's talk about this. So here we go. So with the New World Order and Project Bluebeam, now these terms may sound familiar to some of you, while others may be hearing them for the first time, right? Either way, I want you to really buckle up on this one because we're about to embark on a very enlightened journey with it. So let's talk about the New World Order. Let's unpack the concept of the New World Order. Often abbreviated as NWO, the term is used to describe various conspiracy theories that suggest a covert plan to establish an authoritarian, I think I got the right, global government. With that, proponents of this theory claim that a powerful elite is working behind the scenes to control world events, economics, and even the minds of everyday people. Intriguing, right? So that's kind of a little bit brief about the New World Order. Now let's talk about Project Bluebeam and how this came about. So the origins of Project Bluebeam can be traced back to the 1990s with the work of a Canadian journalist named Sergei Monast. He published a book outlining the theory, suggesting that NASA and the United Nations were the key players in the grand scheme. Since then, the internet has fueled the fire with countless forums, videos, and articles discussing the potential implications of Project Bluebeam. Unfortunately, after discussing this agenda, Sergei lost his children to the government, was arrested for false claims, and then a day or two later died of a heart attack in 1996. So basically, the theory is that he was pretty much as naturally when it comes to somebody whistleblowing to kill them. And I would say that's pretty normal back then before we have the internet and its powerhouse today with social media and stuff. It's like back then you kill somebody when they talked because the control of information was a lot easier. Today, it's a lot harder, so you don't want to make them a martyr. Fortunately, Sergei Monast wasn't the only one who shared these claims. Other players like Dr. Stephen Greer, John Lear, whose father invented the Learjet, and Werner von Braun's associate, Carol Rosen, who Werner shared at his deathbed with her, confession on this concerning agenda. So I'm going to be showing you some videos, and I want you to bear with me. So while these videos may be long, I encourage you to listen to what they have to say, since the information at hand is valuable and detrimental to our survival, to the freedoms of mankind. And I'm not kidding about that. I think they're very detrimental. I think that the information is very important to listen to and really pay attention to. Also, more importantly, is for you to do your own research and to think for yourselves. Times have changed, and it's important that we come back to thinking for ourselves. So the first video I'm going to play for you today is about Dr. Greer. So before I play that video, let me give you a brief about him and also his thoughts about what's going on when it comes to the New World Order and Project Bluebeam. So Dr. Greer, you might be wondering, who is he? Who is Dr. Stephen Greer? For those who are unfamiliar, he is a retired physician and a ufologist known for his work in the field of unidentified flying objects, or UFOs. Dr. Greer founded the Center of the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence and is a prominent figure in the disclosure movement, advocating for full transparency regarding UFOs and extraterrestrial life. But what exactly does he mean by fake alien invasion? Well, Dr. Greer posts or postpone or proposes that there is a possibility that a staged invasion could be orchestrated by governmental and corporate powers. This theory is based on the idea that such an event could be used to manipulate public perception, consolidate power, and distract from pressing global issues. Now, you might be thinking, isn't this just a conspiracy theory, right? Well, I would say this. It's important to approach this topic with an open mind while also applying critical thinking. I would like to say that Dr. Greer argues that the technology we have at our disposal today, advanced drones, military aircraft, and psychological operations, could easily create the illusion of an alien threat, which is a very scary, scary thought. Going with that, supporters of Dr. Greer's theories often point to historical events where governments have used deception as a tactic. For example, and this is really important you hear this, the Gulf of Tonkin incident in the 1960s is often cited as a moment where the US government manipulated information to justify military action. And honestly, that's not the first, right? This these historical these historical things that happened fuel the narrative that a fake alien invasion is not only plausible, but perhaps already in the works. Furthermore, Dr. Greer claims that the media plays a significant role in shaping public perception. He argues that sensationalized coverage of UFO sightings and extraterrestrial encounters can prime society for a potential staged event. The more we are in pretty much inducted in, right? The more we're more exposed to it with images of alien threats, the more likely we are going to accept such an event as a reality. Take a look at this clip, listen to its full.
The very famous astrophysicist, Dr. Jacques Vallée, who some of his work ended up with Steven Spielberg's movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And he's up in his 80s now. And in 1992, he wrote a book, and he had a log entry where he had received a 1985 CIA document that outlined, for psychological warfare purposes, them using these advanced technologies that look like an alien craft and other technologies to, quote, abduct peasants in Argentina and Brazil for their psychological warfare value. Now that's in black and white. And so people go, this sounds crazier than the myth you've been told, and it is. But why would they do that? Werner von Braun, in his deathbed in 1974, told a member of my team, Carol Rosen, that their plan is to create, eventually, an hoax, a threat from outer space, to try to unite the world, like Independence Day, the movie, in a sort of a military global junta of humans against aliens. It's all nonsense. It's BS.
So the next person we're going to talk about on this next clip that's coming up is Carol Rosen. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about Werner von Braun and the connection with Carol Rosen to kind of build up briefly how this came about. So Werner von Braun was born in 1912 in Germany. He was part of Operation Paperclip. That was pretty much after World War II, when the war has ended. A lot of our U.S. government, as well as Soviets, were trying to gather as much German scientists because of their incredible advanced tech they worked during the World War. So with that said, in Germany, he was a pivotal figure in the development of rocket technology during the World War II, and later became a key player in America's space program. Von Braun is best known for his role in the Apollo missions that landed humans on the moon. Well, again, we could talk about that later, if the moon really landing existed or not, but that's another podcast. However, his legacy is not without its complexities. Fast forward to the 1970s, when von Braun began speaking about his concerns regarding the future of space exploration and potential threats to humanity. In particular, he warned about the concept of a false flag alien invasion. This is where Carol Rosen enters the picture. So, who's Carol Rosen? Carol Rosen was an aerospace executive and a former associate of von Braun. She claims that von Braun shared with her his fears about the governments might use the idea of a fake alien invasion as a means to control and manipulate the populace. According to Rosen, von Braun predicted that after the Cold War, we would see an increasing focus on various threats to humanity, including terrorism, asteroids, and eventually aliens. Now, before I continue on, let me explain that. Von Braun talked about 5 things that are going to happen. I don't remember the first one, and I really tried to research it to find it. It was very, very hard, surprisingly, or not surprisingly, to find these 5 things that he was predicting. But the second one was definitely the Cold War. The third one was a war in the Middle East. The fourth one was a pandemic. And the fifth, an alien invasion. What's particularly alarming about this idea is that it suggests a potential agenda of militarizing space under the guise of defending against extraterrestrial threats. Rosen has been vocal about spreading von Braun's message, suggesting that we need to be vigilant and discerning about the information we receive regarding extraterrestrial and the potential invasions. So I will play this clip. Listen very carefully what I should say. I'll get back to you in a moment.
Carol Rosen. In 1974, after being a 6th grade school teacher, I was introduced to the late Dr. Werner von Braun in the U.S., the father of rocketry. In my first meeting with him, during that first 3.5 hours, he said to me, "Carol, you will stop the weaponization of space." And I said, teachers don't stop until June. He said, "No, you have to understand. This is February. And we have to prevent the weaponization of space because there is a lie being told to everyone that the weaponization of space is now first being based upon the evil empire, the Russians. There are many enemies, he said, against whom we're going to build this space-based weapon system. The first of whom was the Russians, which was existing at that time. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be third world countries. Now we call them rogue nations or nations of concern. Then there would be asteroids. And then he would repeat to me over and over, and the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat. Well, at the time, I kind of laughed when he said asteroids, and when he said extraterrestrials, I knew I wasn't going to deal with that subject. And now we hear on the news just today, this week, that they've slid in another enemy. Only this time we're going to protect our satellites. In other words, we have to have some reason to spend these trillions, to waste these dollars on a space-based weapon system, and they're all lies. This is a system, he told me, that would never protect anyone. Even back then, he talked about suitcase bombs. He talked about chemical, viral, bacterial, biological warfare, that these space-based weapons would never protect us against. And then he told me that, in fact, if you travel around the world, which I did after he died in 1977, I met with people in over 100 countries who were friends. They didn't want to build space-based weapons. I became a space and missile defense consultant. And I worked with people around the world. I became an advisor to the People's Republic of China. They don't want to build a space-based weapon system. And he told me back then that they didn't. He said, go to Russia. They're considered to be the enemy. I got on a plane by myself. When I got to Russia, I had a list of people that I had read out of the newspaper. Chernenko was in office then. He was the only one I didn't get a chance to meet. They introduced me to everyone when I got there. And when I got back, I said, oh my Lord, this man is telling the truth. There is no threat. And I've been waiting until this day for 27 years, and I'm expecting the spin to happen, because he also explained to me that as a military strategist, as a person who worked on the MX missile, which I did later, he said, you will find that there is going to be a spin to find some enemy against whom we have to build space-based weapons. And now we should expect the spin, because he said part of the formula for the intelligence community is if they might have a weapon, then we have to consider that they do have these weapons. So now they do have these weapons. So now we have to build these weapon systems. And that's the formula, except that it's all based on a lie. And we have witnesses here today that have shown you that these extraterrestrial beings, that these craft that have come here are now not UFOs, they're identified flying objects. And we know that they have beings in them. And we have witnesses here who have told you that they can shut down our missile silos. They can stop a rocket going into space that's a test. We have witnesses here who have worked in the classified departments, who have the courage to come forward here to support what Wernher von Braun told me back in 1974 to 77. And I will testify before the Congress that when I founded the Institute for Security and Cooperation in Outer Space, which I shut down a few years ago because I didn't believe we had a chance with this huge, integrated around the world, complex weapon system, that we had any chance at all of transforming that war industry into a space industry that could provide benefits, like Dr. Greer has said, of global warming. We can end that situation of that problem. We can end the energy crisis. We can build now non-polluting technologies. Wernher von Braun used to tell me that we could have cars back then that drove around off the ground. He described this to me on beams so that we have no pollution on this planet. And we can solve the problems of the people that are urgent and potential, and the other animals and the other cultures on Earth and in space. And we can end the arms race without dislocating the industry jobs, without disrupting the economy, by transforming, Wernher von Braun told me, the war industry into a global cooperative space industry that will provide, he said, finally, more jobs and profits on this planet than during any hot or cold wartime, more products and services that can be applied directly to solving the problems of this planet. And we can have a whole planet now that lives in peace on Earth, with all the cultures on Earth and with all the extraterrestrial cultures in space. And these are words that Werner von Braun told me in 1974. And I will testify before the Congress under oath about everything I have said and more. Thank you.
Now, this next and final clip is going to be about John Lear. His intro is a bit shorter, but this guy, before I read a little bit about him regarding this subject, I got a lot more to say in addition to what I'll share in the clip and the information I'll share about him. So here we go. Here's a small piece about John Lear. So John Lear and what his connections theory. What is his connections theory? Well, John Lear is a former military officer and a prominent figure in the conspiracy community. He has gained notoriety for his claims about Project Bluebeam, suggesting that the technology exists to create these elaborate illusions that could manipulate public perception and control the masses. Told you it was short, right? But he is a lot bigger when it comes to this world of UFOs, conspiracy, false flag invasions. I would say that you can pretty much tie him to Bob Lazar, which I talked about in an earlier podcast. The reason for George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell's success and bringing the UAP UFO agenda to Congress and so forth. So he's definitely set up a stage and a platform for the subject of not just the false flag and Project Bluebeam and all the stuff's going on. But he is definitely a huge pivotal figure. I call one of the disciples for sure when it comes to the subject of government conspiracy. In the video I'm going to share with you, he's going to talk a little bit as an example with 9/11 regarding his thoughts that it was created as a hologram per se to Project Bluebeam and so forth. Now, I know that sounds crazy out there with people who, I'm not trying to create anything to desensitize or like create any insensitive comments or moments because a lot of people did die in that event. It was very sad and very tragic. I won't forget it. When I was 19 years old, heading to work in the morning, thought this is a bad joke. However, there was some potentially real evidence that it was staged, and I want you all to have an open mind to it. So here's the video. Take a listen.
I said, I'm thinking that the airplanes that crashed into the World Trade Center were holographs. And he said, John, you're probably right. And here's why. He said, just before I retired, I was driving down on the Bayshore Freeway to Sunnyvale. And he said, I had a friend in the right seat of the car. And he says, like it was about 8 o'clock in the morning, maybe 8:15. He said, we're driving south. And we saw this shadow. We looked up, and here he said it wasn't a 747, but it was a huge 4-engine airplane. It wasn't 200 feet above us. And he said we looked out and looked at this thing, and said, of course, we're 20 miles from San Jose, and 30 miles from San Francisco. There's no possible way an airplane could, legitimately be flying right there. And he said we watched it for about 10 seconds, and it went just like you turned the light bulb out. And he said if that was the contemporary holograph presentation of a holograph, he says, then you're right. And the holographic technology is so far advanced that people just wouldn't believe it. But the other day I had a lady here that was helping Marilee on a casting program. Actually, she hired Marilee. She was from New York. She had 2 degrees from Harvard. She was just a wonderful, smart, receptive lady. And we were talking about holographs. She says, well, let me tell you. She said, about 5 years ago, I was invited with about 15 other television executives into a private showing in Hollywood. And there was a little auditorium. It wasn't very big. It could seat like maybe 30 people. And the presentation was called The Future of Television. And she said, I don't remember if Steven Spielberg was there, but, everybody else was. And she said it was, brightly lit. And there was a stage and a podium on the stage. And we're sitting there, and this guy comes out from behind, and he's kind of the German accent, East European accent, white hair, has glasses, and he comes out and he starts going to see history television and how they came up with the first capital grade tube and how they did this and how they did it. And, he's walks down in front of the stage, walks up one of the aisles, he's polishing his glasses, walks in front of him, walks back up to the stage, and she says, it was pretty boring. She says, after about 20 minutes, he wraps it up with something, and that's the history of television. And he puts his glasses on and just like a light.
He disappeared? He was a hologram?
Yeah.
Right. So can you take us through that? Take us through why you think that's true and how you got, you're a pilot. You certainly have, a vote in whether those planes had the capacity to hit those buildings, because our Henry Deacon has told us some very interesting things also about those planes. Actually, he thinks they were remote controlled. I don't know if that's true, but basically that planes don't have the ability to actually steer into buildings at that level. I'm not a pilot, so I don't understand logistics. But how did you come around to this?
Okay, first of all, we're going to talk about Flight 11 and 77 didn't exist in the beginning. The Bureau of Transportation Statistics has no record of them taking off, has no, so let's forget about them because they did not exist. So now we're just talking about 175 and Flight 93. Flight 93 allegedly crashed at Shanksville. Anybody who has any background in accident investigation or any background at all can't possibly believe an airplane crash. There was no record. It just simply could not happen.
Okay.
As far as 175 seen in the South Tower, I just recently put in a call to Pan American flight simulator in Miami to see if I could rent a 767-200, which they have. And what I wanted to do was take six candidate pilots, one current and qualified in the 767-200, one maybe qualified but not current, and then one maybe current in a high-speed jet but not the 767, and then the last three the same currency as the alleged hijackers, like a couple hours in Apache, a private license, maybe a commercial, something like that. And what I would do is in the simulator, you can take them up. That New York is just like it is. The buildings are there, and I would take them and freeze them in a position 20 miles out at 7,000 feet, 560 miles an hour. Put them in the seat. Say, and then give them 2 minutes of looking at the horizons. Show them where the World Trade Center is. And say, I'm about to release you. When I do, you'll have 1 minute and 50 seconds to hit dead center. Now, the World Trade Center is 220 feet wide. You got to hit to the center, not left or right, right to the center. And explain how it goes. Then I would have one camera pointing at the pilot and one camera pointing at what he's looking at.
All right.
And then say, go. And say, okay, now show me how easy this is, because all the guys on AD, I did that in Flight Simulator, no problem, It's impossible. At the height of my career, as proficient I was in every kind of airplane, there's no way I could have done that. It's just too complex. First of all, the airplane can't fly above 560 miles an hour. It can't fly more than 360, which is its velocity max operating. Maybe it could fly maybe 30, 40 miles an hour faster than that, but at VMO, the clacker comes on. The clacker is an FAA required safety device which clacks loud, and it clacks at a rate and a cycle that irritates the pilot so that he can't ignore it. He has to slow down, Now, there's no possibility a hijacker, first time in the airplane, is not only going to, fly it at 390 miles, 400 miles, but do it with that clacker,
right,
and descend and hit that thing center.
Okay, gang. So you heard those videos and so forth. So let's break down a little bit more about the 4 cases, scenarios, what Project Bluebeam is trying to do. So the first one, now this is going to sound a little crazy, but quite interesting, but not far-fetched. Stage 1, the breakdown of all archaeological knowledge. What does that mean? So according to proponents of this theory, the first stage involves the use of advanced technology to create artificial seismic activities, earthquakes, right? This would supposedly lead to the discovery of fake archaeological findings, which would ultimately discredit existing religious beliefs. The aim here is to shake the foundations of faith and create doubt among the followers of major religions worldwide. The theory would suggest that by undermining established beliefs, society would be more susceptible to manipulation. Now, of course, those major religions are going to be Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism. I'm not sure if any other big religions I could think of, but those are the ones I would say are the most popular, massive ones, right? Now, the second stage, the second act, would be called a gigantic space show or a sky show. So what does that look like? The second stage proposes that holographic technology will be used to project images of religious figures in the sky. Just imagine looking up and seeing, how do you say this, a massive image of Jesus, Muhammad, other significant figure addressing the masses. This would be designed to unite people under a single belief system, fostering. I lost my thought there. Excuse me. This would be designed to unite people under a single belief system, fostering a sense of global unity. There we go. But what ultimately, it's about control, right? The theory posts that this event will be so convincing that it would sway millions towards a new world religion. So, to establish a little more context to that, is taking all these major religious figures, Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, Hindu gods, converting into one spiritual entity, saying that all the religions are right, and to really disband the beliefs that is in addition to, quote, these archaeological finds. Now, here is an interesting one. The third stage is telepathic communication. So, if people are not believing what they're seeing, they're going to believe what's in their head and what they're hearing. So, what does that look like? So, the stage 3, telepathic communication. So, next, the next move would be to the third stage, which in perhaps is one of the most chilling elements of the theory. This stage suggests that the authorities would use advanced technology to communicate directly into the minds of individuals. This would create the illusion that God or a higher power is speaking directly to them, providing a guidance and direction. This telepathic communication would serve to reinforce the messages being projected in the sky, furthering and solidifying the control over the populace. So, again, to add more context to detail, what does that look like? Well, cell phones, watches that are iPhone watches, right? Microwaves, believe it or not, it's kind of funny saying that because of microwave communication, or Wi-Fi, baby monitors, garage door openers, anything that is dependable on gigahertz at the right frequency to control people's minds. And if you think about that, I don't know about you, all I can talk about is my age being at 43 and what I've seen at the cusp between my years in high school and the growth of Wi-Fi into the phones. It's like right in that stage of just that perfect element to really take the difference between back then to what we're dealing with now. And I would just say this, things I've encountered with people, I feel that people are a little bit more not, and this is not talking about bad about who they are. I would say that the actions of people have become a little bit more disarray. The mind of just normality, of just logic has really decayed over the years. And all senses of ages. And even I would say this even for myself, I take medication for OCD, and I would say this at times has gotten worse and so forth. I'm thinking, my God, it may be my OCD. It's not OCD. Maybe it's depression. Maybe it's this and that. And I try to contribute to maybe it's technology. Maybe it's because of these things and what they're using with the technology we have today, how it's messing with our minds. And again, I could be very wrong. All I can tell you is my experience over the years and what I've seen and what I felt and how things are so different. I try each day to have a really strong sense and keep my identity as strong as who I am and not change that part where I'm just reacting to everything. That I'm really trying to put an effort to make sure I'm being as very logical as possible. Because I'll tell you right now, in my head, in my eyes, things have changed, not just seeing it and hearing it, but I would say here sort of spiritually, because something's not setting right. Now, I did spend a little bit of time talking about that because that one was a very big, important piece to me regarding the mind control part of it. I think it's really important that we keep our wits, right? Because the world has just gotten a lot stranger. So now, stage 4, the last piece. So stage 4 is the manifestation of a false threat. What does that look like? Finally, we arrive to the 4th stage. This stage theorizes that a staged alien invasion or some form of global threat would occur. The idea is that once the people are united under a new belief system and are feeling, vulnerable, the authorities would present this false threat as a means to consolidate power even further. The fear generated would lead society to accept extreme measures, including the imposition of martial law or even the surrender of freedoms. Which is pretty scary, right? And we look at history, and with history, when you look at people trying to be forced to give up their freedoms, people will rebel. Pretty simple, right? Not saying easy, but simple. Forcefully taking their freedoms, their beliefs, their character, the family values. People are going to rebel. How do we win the war to have our independence in this country? What about other wars who fought for independence for theirs? This piece right here, if you can't take their freedoms by force, you find ways to make them give it up. What makes us stop to think about if there was a fake alien threat or some type of fake stage threat, that the powers to be, this one world government, would not attack their own people. And people give up their fears and hopes just to have some type of normalcy, to stay alive and comforted and protected. But by doing that would be the cost of their freedom. So again, you can't force people. You got to find ways to make it give it up. And that's with a lot of the manipulation that I talked about, the first 3 stages leading to this moment. That could potentially happen. And you know what? Isn't that happening kind of right now? The world has been a lot more disarray than ever. We're having wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes. Weather has been a lot more odd lately. And now I know people are talking about with, global environment and so forth. I'm not saying that's not real, but how do we not know it's not being manipulated by the government? How do we not know we don't have tech out there that could be doing that to create environments in our skies and on our grounds and planets to create disarray and so forth? So again, you create enough confusion to distract people away from the actual game plan on the field that eventually they're going to give up the freedoms when it's just too much. When it's too much. Scary thought. But unfortunately, it's a very honest thought. And as conspiracy crazy that sounds, I encourage people to really, really, really do some research that. To look into that. Again, call me out. I want to be wrong. I definitely want to be wrong on the whole subject. I hope I'm wrong. But all I can tell you is the things I've researched, and this is just the surface of things I've researched regarding the matter with Project Bluebeam, the New World Order, is that I have a lot more things to talk about and say. And if you guys want me to talk more about it and go deeper, have questions, absolutely reach out to me on top of that. But this is just the birth pains of the subject. This is just the beginning of it, right? And so, like I said, do your research. Research the people I talked about today. Research the people I have in video today. You know, maybe you find something to discredit me. Like I said, prove me wrong. Love that. Please. Don't call me crazy. You can call me, well, if you do, doesn't do any good because you can't prove that I'm wrong, or give me or all the stuff. But just definitely like to hear people's logic and thoughts out there regarding the subject, because it is kind of a scary thought, especially since we're at the cusp after the pandemic, and then now we're at this whole UFOs are real type of thing. It was a joke before, but now it's really hitting legacy news media that it's a real thing. The last, 7 years, 6, 7 years, 8 years now, it's been a thing. And if you're like, what are you talking about? What UFO thing? You're under a rock. Look at 2017 Lou Elizondo, New York Post. Look at the congressional hearing by David Rush. Look at the recent testimony from Jake Barber. Also, testimony last year with Lou Elizondo and other whistleblowers. Real congressional hearings. Pull it up. Do your research. Get your head out of the ground. Be alive. Stay in tuned. Be educated. Free think for yourself. So with that being said, with the things I've talked about, I'm going to wrap this up. How you can reach us, like I said in the beginning of the podcast, bound to truth34gmail.com, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Buzzsprouts, X, Facebook, Amazon. Hit the subscribe button. Again, like I said before, the bigger the platform, the bigger the voice, and the platform is yours. I want to say thank you all for listening. Again, have a great, blessed day, and see you on the other side. Goodbye.